blessings, all my 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 blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up.
Happy off day for the NCAA tournament. How sweet it is to be in the 16. All right, so in the West, we are chalk. We have the top 4 seeds. Number 1, Gonzaga will be playing number 4, Arkansas. Number 2, Duke will be playing number 3, Texas Tech. This region will be playing on Thursday. So Gonzaga struggled right out of the gate against 16 seed Georgia State that hung for a solid 30 minutes against Gonzaga. Georgia State's bigs had foul trouble early, and they still managed to hang around in this game. Nasumi, who had just returned after suffering an injury earlier in the season, went down with another knee injury, so unfortunately for him, he did not return to the game. So lots of trouble for the bigs. After that, we weren't sure if Georgia State was ever going to score a basket again in this entire game, so the game was tied at 54 with 12 and a half minutes to go, and they simply ran out of bodies. Chet Holmgren rolled to a 19-point, 17 rebound, 7 block, 5 assist stat line, while Drew Timme dumped in 32 and 13 for a blowout 93-72 win. But again, this was close for 3/4 of the game, and really, if Georgia State had kept a few bodies on the floor, maybe they'd keep it close for a little while longer. Memphis was in the 8-9 matchup. They were up 38-19 on Boise State, and were lucky to close the game out after Boise State closed it to a 5-point gap before Memphis was finally able to pull it away. Amani Bates, who we haven't seen on the court since January when he was playing point guard, and Tigers had a lot of turnover issues, did make it onto the court for this game in the opening round. He played 3.5 minutes, hit a 3-pointer, and then hit the bench again. He wasn't in the game plan, but Penny did decide to give him a few minutes. Memphis held Boise State to 31, just over 31% field goal shooting, 6 for 23 from 3, 13 for 19 at the free throw line. Turnovers were a problem again. They had 15 versus Boise State's 10. They did have a 39-30 rebounding edge and were stifling defensively. So it was a good job there. They did match up. It was a great matchup against the Zags in the second round. Memphis actually led 41-31 at half. The final was 82-78 as Drew Timme put up 25 and 14 in the Zags comeback in the second. They shot 51% from the field. Now, their free throw numbers have been dreadful. They're combined 29 and 54 through the first few games. They're also out-rebounded by the Tigers in this particular game, 40-38, and had more turnovers than the Tigers, 7-5. So Tigers cut the turnover numbers down here, turnovers down, which certainly helped them out, but still weren't quite able to pull the game out. So pretty close to, I guess, what you'd call the perfect game plan for kind of what Memphis would want to do. And it was still a pull-away game from the Zags. Just gave up too many points in the end, 51% from the field. Arkansas survived Vermont and New Mexico State in the bottom half of the bracket. Those are the 12 and 13 seeds. They won by a combined 9 points in those two games. New Mexico State really disrupted 5-seed UConn in the first round and shot 46, 64, and 100%. That's 46 from the field goal, 46% field goal, 64% from 3, and 100% from the free throw line. So stellar numbers there, with Tony Allen putting up 37 points. He only managed 12 against Arkansas, and the shooting numbers were dramatically down for the Aggies against the Razorbacks, who have been one of the best defensive teams in the country, a top 5 team since the change of the calendar year into 2022. The Razorbacks shot 27% from the field and 18% from 3, and combined for 31 turnovers in this gross game against New Mexico State. And they shot pretty bad against Vermont as well. 20 of 25 from the line versus 10 from Vermont was the difference where neither team led by double digits in that game. So they kind of just pulled it out by getting to the line and stifled New Mexico. Gonzaga certainly has had its issues and placed doubt in our minds if they cut down the nets. But if it stays away from the free throw line, I think they'll be okay. Arkansas will certainly keep it close with their defense. But on the season, the Razorbacks are shooting 44% from the field, 30% from three, and those numbers have gotten worse in the tournament. Everyone's usually do as they're playing higher level competition, but I don't think that they have the offense to hang with Gonzaga. To catch up on the bottom half of the bracket, Texas Tech's offense was firing on all cylinders against Montana State in the first round. They won 97-62. They held a 10-point lead about 3 minutes into the game and survived a 35% shooting night against Notre Dame in the next round and won 59-53. The Irish dumped Rutgers in the play-in and pounded inconsistent 5 seed 78-62 in their first round matchup. The Texas Tech Notre Dame game saw the largest lead for the Red Raiders at 7, and they were able to grind it out on that defense. So another team that's struggling offensively. Michigan State, as the 7th seed, put some distance between themselves and Davidson and won 74-73. Davidson hit a 3-pointer at the buzzer, I believe, to push that from a 4-point to a 1-point win. But that was a foul fest at the end of the game, and Michigan State kind of pushed it from a coin flip game and kind of created some distance there. And Davidson fell in the last minute. Duke won 85-76 over Michigan State in the second round. Duke in their first round game hammered CSU Fullerton 78-61. They did have 13 turnovers in that game to CSU's 8, so they did lose the turnover margin there, but they were still able to cruise on. In the Michigan State game, 5 players were in double figures against MSU, and they ended up shooting 57% from the field and 38.5% from 3. Michigan State still shot 50% from 3 and was able to stay in the game that way. But again, Duke lost the turnover battle 10-7 there as well. So just keep an eye on Duke and those turnovers going up against this Texas Tech Red Raiders team. This will be a very interesting game heading into Thursday. I like Texas Tech trying to smother Duke and disrupt this group of freshmen, trying to grab those turnovers. I don't trust Texas Tech's offense, but I did like this group coming in to actually beat Duke in this matchup. This might be the one matchup that I mapped out correctly, and I think I'm going to stick with that. Something about Duke I just don't quite trust. So I think I'm going to pick Texas Tech to continue to ride out here, but this will be a great game coming up on Thursday. In the South region, number 1 seed Arizona survived, and they'll be playing 5th seed at Houston. While in the bottom half of the bracket, number 2 seed Villanova is playing 11th seeded Michigan. And this region will play out on Thursday as well. The Arizona Wildcats put away Wright State 87-70 in the first round and survived TCU in overtime in the round of 32. We did have a questionable no-call steal at the end of regulation in a very tough game. Arizona did have a chance to score at the very end off that steal, but the ball was still in the hands of, I forget which player it was now, when the buzzer went off. I think you have to be more aware in that situation and just kind of pitch it up. You do have the clock in front of you when you're running down the court. Just something to be mindful of. They could have won it in regulation. I think that could have been a foul call as well. If you watch the TCU player, try not to get a backcourt violation. Try not to get bumped off his spot. And that was kind of questionable. It was probably right not to call that foul. But Arizona ends up pulling away in overtime. TCU, to get to that point, they crushed number 8 seed Seton Hall 69-42 in their first round game and wasn't even close. Seton Hall's coach Kevin Williard is now going to Maryland. So his focus is rightly being questioned after that game and that blowout loss. During his press conference after the loss, he was asked about whether or not he was taking the Maryland job, and he merely said he wasn't going to talk to his agent until after the tournament was completed, so that was coming up for him on the horizon. But he did take time to mention that it would be the happiest thing that ever happened to him if Shaheen Holloway took his spot as the next coach at Seton Hall if he were to leave. And of course, Shaheen Holloway is the head coach of St. Peter's as they were making the run and a former assistant to Williard. So of course that's hot in the media now, as will the St. Peter's coach be the next one for Seton Hall, now that Williard has indeed left for Maryland. Now, Arizona's defense does seem a little questionable in the interior. They could struggle against Houston, but I'm not sure the Cougars had the firepower to keep up. The fact that they've made it this far is astounding, and credit to Coach Ralph Sampson. Two headlines for the Cougars have been that they've lost two top players heading into the season, or one of them was during the season, but two of the top guys are out, yet they keep on winning, but they also haven't notched any big wins. And the AAC, Memphis and SMU were the other two up-and-comers in this group. Only Memphis made the tournament. Houston is 1-2 against Memphis, 2 regular season losses and 1 win in the tournament at the end of the year. And I believe they split against SMU regular season. So they didn't even fare well against the other good teams in their conference. In the first round, they beat UAB. The Blazers were a popular upset pick, but they rolled the Blazers 82-68, and then stunned 4th seed Illinois in the second round 68-53. It was a shocking win, not in the win itself, but how effective they were. Illinois in their first round game knocked off Chattanooga, who was a popular upset pick. They won that by 1 point, 54-53, but the game plan was really questionable at best. Coffey looked shocked at the aggressive double teams on the post, and every time he caught the ball, there was someone in his face, and that should have been navigated, certainly expected with that bodies that Chattanooga could throw at him. Game execution was just really poor, and that carried over to the Houston game as well. Neither team shot well, but defenses, Houston's game, and Ralph Sampson had a great game plan to kind of pull the group through there. Houston led by 12 early. Illinois fought all the way back and led by 3. Then Houston clamped back down, pushed the lead out to 16, and won by 15 points. Now, Coffey had 19 points on 6 of 11 shooting and hit all 7 of his free throws, which is shocking considering he went 5 for 10 on Friday against Chattanooga. But the rest of the team went 11 for 49 from the field. 11 for 49. And after losing back-to-back years in the second round of the tournament, last year by 13 to Loyola Chicago, after having assembled such great rosters, I think you have to question coaching in these big situations a little bit for the Illini. That's a bad look there in Champaign. So I don't think Houston will be able to actually match up with Arizona real well here. Arizona didn't allow Wright State or TCU to shoot well from the field, but playing one of the highest tempos in the country does allow for a lot more shots and a lot of points. Wright State did end up putting up 70, and TCU put up 80 in overtime and was able to certainly be aggressive and score in the paint, which led Arizona to have to play from behind to actually force overtime. So we'll see. I don't think it's one of the top games at all on the slate, and I expect Arizona to roll in this one. In the bottom half of the bracket, number 2 Villanova is still alive and swinging, but they had their hands full against Delaware for a while in the first round before putting the Hens away 80-60. They played Ohio State in the second round, who themselves were a bit of an upset favorite. They beat Loyola Chicago in the first round 54-41 in an unexpected defensive battle with an unexpected result, as the Buckeyes actually smothered the Ramblers in order to win that game. Villanova then was upsetting for Buckeye fans, but knocked off Ohio State 71-61 in a game where Villanova didn't play particularly well. But they did advance to the Sweet 16. And that leaves Michigan kind of aligned for another game where they'll be able to hang around. And possibly point guard Javonte James may return as well. He was ruled out of the first game against Colorado State due to a concussion, so Michigan actually started 3 point guards. And Colorado State came out pretty hot in that game, and they led 36-29 at half, but shot 29% in the second half, and were outscored 46-27 as Michigan out-rebounded the Rams 36-25. and had a 34-16 edge in the paint and just crushed and rolled the Mountain West squad out of the first round. Hunter Dickinson has been one of the top players in the tournament, especially with some great guys getting bumped in the first round. He followed up a 21-point, 6-rebound, 4-block performance against Colorado State by putting up 27 points and 11 boards against Tennessee. The Vols smoked Longwood 88-56 in their opener. It was actually close for 9 minutes, so about a quarter of the game. It was 15-17 before the Vols just crushed Longwood and looked like one of the strong teams coming out of the very first round. When Michigan and Tennessee tangled there, Michigan pulled away 76-88, and again, Hunter Dickinson was the top player, the very best-looking player on the court, and he's involved in all kinds of play actions besides just shooting the ball and creating his own shot. And Juwan Howard just done a great job of getting him completely involved in every piece of that offense, and he's been very efficient. Michigan shot 50% from the field, 37% from three, 80% from the free throw line, and they had 15 turnovers to the Vols 7, and still pulled the game out. And they will be in the Sweet 16. They will have to clean up those turnovers against Villanova. Villanova can throw a lot of different bodies at them. I'm not sure that they pull this game out. I still think Villanova will advance here. I believe I originally had Tennessee. I think Villanova will advance. But I think Michigan does have the ability to game plan appropriately, get Hunter Dickinson involved, find some mismatches, hopefully get their starting guard back, and possibly pull an upset here. And we'll have an 11th seed maybe advancing to the Elite 8. And we'll for sure have another double-digit seed in the Midwest region in just a moment. The East is home to 4 seed UCLA and 8 seed North Carolina, while number 3 seed Purdue will be battling darling 15 seed St. Peter's out of New Jersey. Number 1 seed Baylor rolled Norfolk State in the first round, 85-49. And 8 seed North Carolina embarrassed Marquette 95-63 in the first round. The Marquette Golden Eagles rattled off an impressive 7-game win streak with victories over Villanova, Providence, Xavier, and twice over Seton Hall just a couple of months ago, but finished the season losing 6 of 9, so they flamed out hard at the end of the year. And UNC has been hot since being beat by Pittsburgh, an 11-16 Pittsburgh team in mid-February. They've won 8 of 9 all the way up to this point, with a lone loss coming to Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament. So they are on fire, much like Memphis was coming into this tournament, much like, of course, Gonzaga was coming into this tournament. UNC built a 25-point lead over Baylor when they tangled in the second round. An ACC Player of the Year, Armando Bacot, was a monster on the boards. He was only 4 for 10 shooting and horrible at the free throw line, hitting 7 of 15 for 15 points total, but had 16 rebounds, including 4 offensive rebounds. Caleb Love, the starting point guard, fouled out. He was only 1 for 6 from the field with 6 turnovers, but a big piece of making that offense go. And Brady Manick had a questionable elbow swing behind his head, which made contact with the Baylor player's face that resulted in a flagrant 2 and an ejection, so he was booted out of the game. He had 26 points and 5 rebounds at that point, and he was hugely missed as Baylor made a run after that point, and the game eventually went into overtime. But UNC had a 25-point lead. Only one other team, I believe, has ever blown a 25-point lead that would have equaled the largest comeback ever in an NCAA tournament game. UNC did outscore the Bears then 13-6 in overtime without the 2 starters. And RJ Davis led in scoring with 30 points. Baylor is a solid defensive team, but UNC did shoot 49% from the field, 44% from 3. It was really a mess at the end, even with players out, letting a team, come back from 25 down to tie it up. Sloppy. They tried to give the game away, but it's college basketball sometimes. So they advance, and it was an impressive year for Baylor. To lose 4 of your starters from last year's championship team and still finish as co-champions of the Big 12 with an unhealthy team, losing 2 players throughout the year, an unhealthy rebuilt team, and to still finish at the top of your conference and roll in as the number 1 seed is very, very impressive for the Baylor Bears. And UNC is, despite trying to self-sabotage the end of this game, is red hot. Now, UCLA had its hands full in the first round against 13 seed Akron, shooting 35% from the field, but they pulled out the game 57-53. They did not look good, and they trailed with just over 2 minutes to go, but they pulled that game out. In the second round, they did drop number 5, St. Mary's, 72-56. Had 5 players in double figures, I believe, as did the Gales, but UCLA did manage to pull that game out. In the first round, the Gales shot the lights out against play-in team Indiana, who just looked burnt out. The Hoosiers had punched out Wyoming out of the Mountain West 2 nights earlier in the first 4. They looked like a solid group in that game, winning 66-58. Of course, Indiana made a run in the Big Ten Conference Tournament just to make it in to the NCAA tournament. But they certainly had flight issues getting to the appropriate location here for round 1. Number of flight delays, flight push-arounds, and they just look exhausted from a game 2 nights earlier and trying just to get to the location here, and the Gales shot the lights out in the first round before promptly getting punched out themselves by UCLA. In the end, the biggest piece of news is that Jamie Jacquez Jr. injured his ankle around the 7-minute mark of the second half of the St. Mary's blowout, and he's questionable with a right ankle sprain against North Carolina. That's a big, big problem. He'd be greatly missed on that lineup. I've been leaning North Carolina on this anyways. They're firing on all cylinders despite the, attempted self-sabotage at the end of that game against Baylor, despite the unusual circumstances, the flagrant 2, the foul out. But still, UNC against a UCLA team that just does not look impressive at times, despite the athletes that they have there. The possible injury. I'm looking at UCLA here, but this will be one of the top games on the marquee. Bottom half of the bracket. 15th seed St. Peter's beat 2nd seed Kentucky 85-79 in overtime. Oscar Tshiebwe was in tears as he was the only player for Kentucky that did not suck. He was the Julius Randle of the squad, if you will, and put up 30 points and 16 rebounds. Nobody could shoot for Kentucky. It was awful. Tshiebwe is Player of the Year finalist with Johnny Davis of Wisconsin, Keegan Murray of Iowa, and Achai Abji of Kansas. I will never get that right. He is actually the only one left in the tournament, the Kansas player, with Wisconsin and Iowa and Kentucky all being eliminated. Daryl Banks for St. Peter's scored 27, and Doug Ebert scored 20 off the bench. He later added another 13 in round 2 against Murray State to become one of the stars of the tournament. He's since pulled in an NIL deal with Buffalo Wild Wings. How about that? St. Peter's is somewhere 240-something in terms of offensive efficiency in the country. They're more known for their defense, and they did a solid job here. But the offense hit 51% of its field goals and 53% from 3. Also 18 of 21 from the free throw line. So the offense had a stellar night, which is what you need for upsets like this. So what else could you possibly do after winning a single game in the NCAA tournament? We'll get back to that in just a second. As number 7 Murray State beat number 10 San Francisco later that night, 91-87 in overtime, in an excellent game. It obviously lost some national attention as the Kentucky-St. Peter's game had already been decided, and the winner was not playing St. Peter's. They weren't going to be matched up against Kentucky, so we lost some luster there. Matt McCann, the Racers head coach, will take over for Will Wade at LSU. He reached the NCAA tournament 5 times, won 4 OVC titles, and 2 NCAA tournament games in 7 seasons with Murray State, while rolling up a 154-67 record. The Racers crushed Marquette in 2019 behind John Morant before getting crushed by Florida State. So the Racers, no strangers to the tournament at this point, but they survive a great battle here in 2 small school teams. In the second round, the Peacocks of St. Peter's beat Murray State 70-60, and a game they led the entire way. Their shooting numbers did come down. They won through gritty defense and they quite frankly just outplayed Murray State all the way through. Now, this game, unfortunately, might be where the Peacocks' run ends. They did match up against, of course, one of the best bigs in the country, Player of the Year in the running, Sheboy, but I don't know how they'll match up against the rotating centers of Purdue. Freshman Zach Edey and Travion Williams will be way too much, I think, for them. But Purdue did handle Yale 78-56 in the opener, and then Texas 81-71 in a game that was a 3-point difference with 1:04 to play before Purdue was able to pull that game out. The Boilermakers did lead by 14 at one point and simply had more talent. They were blowing Texas out early. It looked like it was going to be not even close. Texas in their first round matchup beat popular upset pick Virginia Tech in the first round there, round 64. They beat them 81-73. So a great run by the Virginia Tech Hokies, who needed to win the ACC tournament just to make the NCAA tournament. If they lost to Duke in the finals, they probably didn't have the record to make it, and it ended quite promptly. First round loss. But other than that, that little section played out exactly as it had mapped, with Purdue, the 3 seed, coming out. Now, in the Midwest, number 1 seed Kansas and number 4 seed Providence advance. Chalk there. Friars are the only team in the field that pretty much dominated both games. In the opening round, they'd slowed down South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, who led the country in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage and were very efficient. The game started out pretty hot and cooled down after that to kind of a more methodical coaching battle and matchup-based defensive approach for both teams. The 12th-seeded Richmond Spiders pulled a huge upset in the first round of their game and smothered the high-tempo Iowa Hawkeyes. They bounced them and the Player of the Year candidate Keegan Murray right out of the tournament. Now, Murray did roll his ankle in the first half of this game, so I don't know if it affected his play. I couldn't find any news on it, but it certainly seems strange. He did finish 8 of 15 from the field with 21 points and 7 rebounds, but it sure seems like he didn't command the game as he normally does. Now, this is one of the games that was poorly officiated, and there were several of them. But in the final minute, a 3-pointer was attempted by Iowa, and the ball came up as an air ball due to an arm chop, but no foul was called. Could have sent Iowa to the line to potentially tie the game with free throws. Instead, Richmond grabbed the rebound and was able to go down and extend the lead to 5 with less than a minute left, essentially ending the game. It's just a poorly officiated game and an obvious no call. The announcers were going crazy, said it should have been a call. I just could have been a lot different. Instead, Richmond, grabbed the board and went down and won the game. Providence had no problems with Richmond. They beat the 12 seed 79-51 and squished the Spiders. Texas beat Texas Southern 83-56 and then held off Creighton 79-72 in a game that was again right down to the wire, where Kansas had to kind of pull away with free throws. Now, the Blue Jays have been struggling with injuries, kind of like Houston and Baylor. So you can't help but wonder what would have happened if they'd still had Ryan Nembhard, who went down with an injury. He had 11 points per game and 4 assists on average, so that hurt the team. However, out of the top 6 contributors for this squad, 3 were freshmen and 1's a sophomore. So they'll return a ton of talent last year to a team that won about 25 games, I believe. They did knock out 8 seed San Diego State in their first round matchup. They scored 8 straight games at the end of regulation to force it into overtime and win it there. So some great experience early for that team. And San Diego State, of course, being a very efficient defensive squad, able to score when it mattered, force overtime, win a big game, and of course come close to beating Kansas. So great run for the Blue Jays here. And Kansas advances. I don't have a lot of faith in them moving forward, and I actually really like the way that the Friars are playing, so I would hedge on them advancing and Kansas being the second number 2 seed to go down. It's just more of a feeling than based on any statistical factors. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. We'll see how the game goes, but I am betting on the Friars to roll. The bottom of the Midwest saw an 11-seed upset when Iowa State knocked off LSU, the 6th seed, 59-54. Two defensive teams going at it here. Now, LSU replaced half its coaching staff just a couple days earlier when Will Wade was let go after allegations of recruiting, I believe, that came about years ago, I believe, at this point, that were finally coming to fruition. So he was just let go days earlier. One of the, I can't even remember which coaching member was bumped up to intern, and then he in turn replaced a couple staffing members. So that whole group will probably be out of there. It's probably irrelevant. That whole group will probably be gone. Wisconsin survived Colgate shooting in the first round, 67-60. The Badgers struggling. Johnny Davis, obviously the leader of that team, probably still suffering ankle problems. Miami battled USC in the 7-10 game, and the Hurricanes survived 68-66. And then Auburn struggled for about 16 minutes against Jacksonville State in the first half there before everything came unraveled for the number 2 seed. Auburn ended the first half on an 11-point scoring run and waxed the number 2 seeds. That was the first round games. Now, against USC, Miami was 1 of 14 from 3. Well, the Trojans hit 9 3-pointers. Now, they both hit exactly 24 field goals, but Miami doubled up on free throw attempts to kind of survive the Trojans there. Against Auburn, who they upset in the second round, Miami was 3 of 15 from 3, but shot almost 49% from the field, while stifling Auburn's whole offensive plan, holding them to 30% from the field, 19% from 3, and just crushed them 79-61. We knew Auburn had problems all over the place in kind of getting it together there with the program, despite an awesome record this year. So Miami Hurricanes upsetting 2-seed Auburn in the second round, and they won the turnover battle 13-4, as the guards had all kinds of issues. So not quite as surprising for those that have paid a little bit closer attention to college basketball, not just records. Now, Johnny Davis and those ankle issues seem to come to more of a head, and their loss to Iowa State, which was shocking. He only took 7 shot attempts, 3 of 7 from the field for 12 points. He did have 4 boards, 4 steals, 4 assists. Wisconsin shot a combined 2 of 22 from 3, shot horribly from the field against a good defensive Iowa State team, and they pulled another upset and knocking off the Badgers, who have had a bad stretch now, going back to the Big Ten tournament at the end of the regular season where they lost to Penn State. Just a bad run for Wisconsin at the end of the year. You have to think it's related to, of course, Johnny Davis's injury and really not having enough pieces around him despite a great Big Ten year, a competitive Big Ten year. But when your top guys having some issues, not able to pull through in the big games. Now, Iowa State wasn't much better themselves. 3 of 14 from 3 after hitting 12 3-pointers against LSU, but they survived the rock fight. Now, that was a term that was thrown around quite a bit this past 4-day weekend, and it was mostly used incorrectly. We had a lot of really poorly executed offensive game plans that resulted in low shooting percentages, terrible games shooting-wise, but it wasn't always used correctly, and too often for games that didn't quite fit that description, just bad offensive games. So, but that's not shocking, considering how many made-up words we hear announcers say. Now, Miami is 4 for 29 from 3 so far, and Ohio State has held opponents to 6 for 41 from 3. So we'll see if that's a problem in there now. 10-11 matchup, which one of those teams will go to the Elite Eight. I still like Miami more than Iowa State. I just think they have the ability to score more than Iowa State. Not a super intriguing matchup, I don't think. Certainly on the lower end of things. Now, Iowa State has had a great season this year behind TJ Osselberger. He was part of the ISU coaching staff from 06 to 13, then returned for the 2015-16 season, assistants all that time. And his first head coaching job was at South Dakota State and UNLV the past few years. And finally, his third stint as Ohio State was his first big head coaching job here, as he was brought back this season, and he used the transfer portal to rebuild this team from a 2-21 season last year. Excellent coaching job by him. not only to have a winning record, but to get them into the tournament, get them a win, get them 2 wins, maybe get them 3 is excellent. They actually started the season 12-0 this year before losing to Baylor. All their losses so far have been to conference teams. They actually have a losing record in Big Ten play, but they rolled up some great wins in the non-conference. So good job by TJ Otzelberger in his 3rd stint here with the Cyclones as he's finally head coach, and now finally head coach at a Power 5 job and doing a phenomenal job here. So to reevaluate here in the West, I like number 1 seed Gonzaga to knock off number 4 seed Arkansas in a close game, and I'd like them to play number 3 seed Texas Tech, who will narrowly win over Duke and end Coach Krzyzewski's career. That'll be my Elite 8 in the West, and I do think Gonzaga wins that game to head to the Final Four. No shocker there. In the South, I do like Arizona to pull it out against Houston. I'm not sure whether Houston kind of pulls away, outraces Houston, whether that's still a lower scoring game, whether Houston is able to speed it up a little bit and stay with Arizona's tempo, or whether Houston's able to slow down Arizona a little bit. I'm not sure which way that goes, but Arizona, I think, ends up pulling away by double digits. And I like Villanova over Michigan narrowly, although I think that could really go either way. I like them to win by maybe 8 or 9. So Arizona and Villanova in the Elite 8 in the South. And man, I had that close for a while there on whether I would pick Arizona, Villanova, or Tennessee coming out of that region. I like the top 3 seeds. And I think I'm going to go with Villanova to survive and make it to the Final Four at this point over Arizona. I like Colin Gillespie, of course, who's recovered from his ACL injury to, do a lot for the Big East this year. They would have won it outright, but the conference decided to determine the winner by win percentage, so it went to Providence, even though Villanova beat Providence twice this year. Providence played fewer games due to COVID pauses, so I do like that they have a top player, offense, defense, been there before, can throw a number of bodies at folks defensively. I like what Villanova can do matchup-wise to Arizona. In the East region, I like UNC for some reason. I don't know why. I like the 8 seed there, UNC, to beat UCLA, and I like Purdue to advance. And I think I'm going to take the Boilermakers to go to the Final Four as the 3 seed. I just like what Edey can do, and I like what Ivy can do, and I like the inside-out weapon on the perimeter, threats in the paint. So I'm going to go Purdue, although UNC making a run to the Final Four would be very North Carolina of them as an 8 seed. In the Midwest, I'm going to pick Providence over Kansas, the 4 seed, and I'm going to pick them to match up against 10 seed Miami. I'm actually going to pick the Friars as the 4 seed to go to the Final Four. I like what they're doing there. Beyond that, I'm actually going to pick Gonzaga over Purdue to continue to the national championship at this point. Probably not a shocker there. I'm actually going to pick Villanova over the Friars. And not shocking to anyone, we'll see Gonzaga and Villanova back in the national championship. And I will stick with my original pick, Gonzaga, although I think that would be a great matchup. So that's where I'm at now, back on my reassessment. As far as actual top watches heading into this weekend, Texas Tech and Duke on Thursday, and Michigan Villanova on Thursday from the West and South regions. Gonzaga Arkansas should be close. Arizona Houston could be interesting, but those are back row watches as far as I'm concerned. Friday top watches will be the 7:30 game between number 1 Kansas and number 4 Providence, and the 9:40 game between number 4 UCLA and number 8 North Carolina, because I do think Purdue will take out St. Peter's, and Miami, Iowa State. One of them's got advanced, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a particularly interesting watch. So there you go. Top watches, top predictions from now on, and a brief recap from the games that you mostly probably watched already. We'll go down from 16-4 over the next stretch here at the end of the week through this weekend. Very, very exciting. We'll see if we have another sneaky upset in there. If we have a Providence in the Final Four, or an 8th seed North Carolina, or a St. Peter's, or an 11th seed Michigan, or a Houston team that you wouldn't think. So we'll see. Very excited. Final Four, here we come.
All my blessings, all my blessings. All my blessings, all my blessings. All my blessings, all my blessings. All my blessings, all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a